The first thing you notice is the smell. It's a sterile, biting trinity of antiseptic, latex, and something metallic and primal that clings to the back of your throat. Blood. For Dr. 70 Athley One-Hen Eris Thorne, it was the smell of a Saturday night at City Central Hospital. It was the smell of home. Multiple contusions, possible internal bleeding, get him to trauma 2, page ortho now. Eris's voice cut through the controlled chaos of the ER like a scalpel. She moved with an economy of motion that bordered on a dance, a fluid response to the symphony of beeping monitors, rattling gurneys, and the hushed, panicked sobs of family members. She was a whirlwind in blue scrubs, her dark hair pulled back in a tight, no-nonsense ponytail, her eyes exhausted but blazing with a fierce, unwavering focus. She had just finished setting the dislocated shoulder of a terrified teenager, her calm voice a soothing balm against his pain-filled yelps. "See? All back in place. You'll be throwing a football again by next season," she'd promised, her smile briefly erasing the weariness from her face. Her charge nurse and longtime friend, Maya, a woman whose placid exterior hid a core of steel, materialized at her elbow. "Deep breath, Doc. The weekend warriors are out in full force." She handed Eris a tablet displaying a new admission form. A single field was highlighted in an aggressive, accusatory red. Insurance pending. Eris glanced at it, her jaw tightening. "Another one from the Omni Health Directive," she muttered, the name of the hospital's parent corporation tasting like ash in her mouth. "Let me guess. We're supposed to give him 2 aspirin and a bill before we find out what's actually wrong?" "You know the drill," Maya said, her voice low. "Stabilize and treat him. Dr. Vance has been making his presence known." Eris's spine stiffened at the name. Dr. Marcus Vance, Chief Hospital Administrator, her ex-husband. The man who saw patients not as people, but as liabilities on a spreadsheet. "Let him patrol his numbers," she said, turning away. "I have patience." The words were still hanging in the air when the call crackled over the paramedic's radio, a jolt of pure adrenaline. "Dispatch, this is Medic 1. En route to City Central, ETA 2 minutes. We have a GSW, single gunshot wound to the abdomen. Male, approximate age mid-30s, no ID. Vitals are crashing. Repeat, vitals are crashing." The ER's chaotic rhythm snapped into a single sharp beat. John Doe. GSW. The 2 most terrifying and unpredictable phrases in emergency medicine. "Trauma 1, Eris commanded, her voice ringing with an authority that left no room for argument. "Get me Oneg, a full surgical tray, and page Dr. Hansen. I want him on standby." 2 minutes later, the ambulance bay doors burst open. The man on the gurney was a canvas of gray, waxy skin and crimson-soaked fabric. He was unconscious, his breathing shallow, a single dark hole in his abdomen weeping blood onto the white sheets. He was an island of death in a sea of life-saving urgency. Eris met the gurney, falling into step as the paramedics wheeled him toward the trauma room. "No exit wound. Pressure is bottoming out, 80/50 and dropping. He's bleeding out internally." Her hands were a blur, cutting away fabric, assessing the damage, her mind a supercomputer of medical knowledge running 1,000 calculations a second. In that moment, he wasn't a John Doe. He was her patient. He was her only focus. Then came the inevitable interruption, the voice of bureaucracy in the temple of healing. A registration clerk, a nervous young man named Tim, scurried in, clutching a clipboard like a shield. "Dr. Thorne? He's a John Doe. No identification, no insurance on file. The Omni Health protocol is clear. We're to stabilize for transfer to County General." Eris didn't even look up from her patient. "He won't survive the ride to the parking lot, let alone a 20-minute transfer across town. We're taking him up to the OR. Now." "But Doctor..." Before Tim could finish, a different voice, smooth and cold as polished steel, cut him off from the doorway. "That won't be necessary, Tim." Dr. Marcus Vance stood there, a vision of corporate perfection in a bespoke charcoal suit that seemed to repel the ER's grime and desperation. His silver-streaked hair was perfectly coiffed, his expression one of mild paternal disappointment. He looked at the dying man on the gurney, then at Eris, and his gaze was exactly the same, calculating. "Dr. Thorne, a word, please, in the hall." Eris felt a hot surge of defiance. She placed a gloved hand on the patient's gurney, a silent claim of ownership. "I'm a little busy keeping a man from dying, Marcus. Whatever it is, it can wait." "No," Marcus said. his voice dropping but losing none of its authority. It can't. She met Maya's wide, worried eyes, then reluctantly followed her ex-husband into the relative quiet of the hallway. The air immediately felt colder. What is this, Marcus? He didn't raise his voice. He never did. That was his power. He could destroy you with a whisper. It's about policy, Eris. A policy you seem to hold in constant contempt. The patient is uninsured. A John Doe GSW is a financial black hole. The board at OmniHealth, the people who sign our paychecks, are watching my hospital's margins like hawks. We are not a charity. He is a human being, Eris hissed, her voice low and furious. And he will die on a gurney in your hallway if we don't get him into an operating room in the next 10 minutes. My oath, the one we both took, says I have to save him. The law says I have to stabilize him. Stabilize, yes. Perform a multi-hour, six-figure surgery on him? Absolutely not, Marcus countered, his calm a perfect, infuriating foil to her fire. He took a step closer, the scent of his expensive cologne, a violation in the antiseptic air. Your oath doesn't pay for this hospital's new MRI machine. Your bleeding heart doesn't impress shareholders. Don't make this a fight, Eris. It's not personal. It's just business. The words, so reasonable, so detached, made her vision swim with red. She saw her brother, Ben, his face pale in a hospital bed years ago, as doctors debated insurance coverage while a treatable infection turned septic. Marcus knew that story. He knew it was the wound that had shaped her, and he was pressing on it with a surgeon's cruel precision. She looked from his cold, dispassionate eyes back toward the open door of Trauma 1, where the steady beep of the heart monitor was starting to falter, becoming frantic. A choice. A man's life measured against a corporate mandate. It was no choice at all. Then I guess I'm violating policy, she said, her voice quiet but ringing with finality. She turned her back on his stunned, angry face and walked back into the crucible, leaving him alone with his spreadsheets and his bottom line. Get him to the oar, she commanded the team, who had been watching with bated breath. Now? The hours that followed were a blur of intense concentration. In the sterile blue-green world of the operating room, the politics of the hospital faded away. There was only the body on the table, the intricate puzzle of damaged organs, and the singular mission to mend it. Eris's hands, steady and sure, moved with a practiced grace, clamping bleeders, suturing torn tissue, fighting a microscopic war against death itself. The suction gurgled, a hungry sound, while the heart monitor held its steady, reassuring rhythm beat she had wrestled back from the brink. During a rare, stable moment while the anesthesiologist adjusted his drips, she glanced at her patient's face. He looked younger than she'd first thought, with strong features softened by unconsciousness. In that moment, he wasn't a policy violation or a financial liability. He was just a man someone, somewhere, was probably worried about. She had made the right choice. She knew it in her bones. After what felt like an eternity, it was over. He's stable, she announced, the words heavy with exhaustion and triumph. Let's get him to recovery. The next morning, the adrenaline had worn off, replaced by a bone-deep weariness and the cold dread of inevitability. The summons came via a sterile email at 7:05 a.m. Doctor placed by the waiter email. Vance requires your presence in his office at 8:00 am sharp. Marcus's office was on the top floor, a minimalist expanse of glass and steel overlooking the city. It was designed to make you feel small. He was seated behind a vast, empty mahogany desk, a single manila folder placed squarely in its center. He didn't ask her to sit. Eris, he began, his voice devoid of any emotion. I consider myself a patient man, but for years you have consistently and willfully placed your own moralistic crusades above the financial health and operational stability of this institution. He opened the folder. Last night was the final straw. I have here a report detailing your gross insubordination, your direct violation of established OmniHealth transfer protocols, your unauthorized, multi-hour use of premium surgical resources on a non-admitted patient, incurring a cost to this hospital that will likely never be recouped. He spoke as if reading from an indictment, framing her compassion as a series of criminal acts. You saved a man's life, Marcus, she said, her voice flat. I run a hospital, not a vigilante justice league, he replied without looking up. You are a brilliant surgeon, Eris, but you are a terrible employee. You are a liability. You left me no choice. It was the classic line of the executioner, the abdication of all responsibility. He pushed a single sheet of paper across the polished expanse of the desk. A termination letter. Your employment at City Central Hospital, and by extension any OmniHealth affiliated facility, is terminated, effective immediately. Please leave your ID badge and pager on the desk. Security will escort you to your locker to collect your personal effects. A strange numbness washed over her. It wasn't the shock of the firing she'd known it was coming. It was the chilling, impersonal cruelty of it. The man she had once shared a life with was erasing her from the institution she loved with the flick of a pen. She didn't argue. She didn't plead. Words were useless here. She simply unclipped her badge, the plastic ID with her smiling face feeling like an artifact from another life, and placed it on the desk next to the pager. The small clatter it made was the only sound in the cavernous office. She gave him one last look, a gaze filled with a contempt so pure it was almost silent, and turned. 2 uniformed security guards were waiting for her at the door. They walked behind her, their presence a loud declaration of her disgrace. Colleagues she had known for years, doctors and nurses she'd shared laughter and trauma with, saw her coming down the hall. Their eyes darted away. They found sudden interest in charts, in computer screens, in the floor tiles. She was a pariah, the system was protecting itself, and she was on the outside. The walk was the longest of her life. Each step was a fresh wave of humiliation, a confirmation that in the war between compassion and commerce, commerce had just won a crushing victory. 24 hours later, Eris's world had shrunk to the 4 walls of her small, quiet apartment. The silence was the loudest thing she'd ever heard, a stark, mocking contrast to the life and death symphony of the ER she had been exiled from. A single cardboard box sat on her coffee table, a pathetic collection of the artifacts of her former life, a favorite coffee mug, a few well-worn medical textbooks, and on top, her neatly folded white doctor's coat. It looked like a shroud. She'd spent the day making the obligatory calls, each one a fresh twist of the knife. A former mentor, a respected surgeon she'd idolized in medical school, had been sympathetic but firm. "Eris, listen to me. Don't fight this. OmniHealth's legal team will bury you. They'll blacklist you so thoroughly you won't be able to get a job volunteering at a veterinary clinic. Take the loss and walk away." A lawyer specializing in wrongful termination had been even more blunt. "Dr. Thorne, they've got you dead to rights. You admit you knowingly violated a written hospital policy. Morally right? Maybe. Legally actionable? Not a chance. You'd burn through your savings just to have a judge laugh you out of court. The system wasn't just broken, it was a fortress, and she had just been thrown from its highest turret. Defeated, she sank onto her couch, her gaze falling on a framed photograph on the mantelpiece. It was of her and her younger brother, Ben, taken the summer before he got sick. They were grinning, vibrant, full of a future that would be stolen from him by a delayed diagnosis caught in a snarl of insurance pre-authorizations. He was the ghost that haunted every decision she made, the reason she fought so hard for every patient, no matter their circumstances. And now, that same fierce dedication had led to her ruin. She felt a profound, crushing sense of failure, not just to herself, but to his memory. Her phone buzzed. It was Maya. "Eris?" Her friend's voice was a nervous whisper. "Are you okay?" "Define okay," Eris said, trying for a joke that fell flat. "Listen, something weird is going on here," Maya said, her voice hushed. "Security has completely sealed off the ICU floor where they were keeping your John Doe. No one in, no one out. And Marcus? He's been in closed-door meetings all day with these serious-looking people in dark suits. They don't look like doctors or OmniHealth reps. They look like feds." A flicker of confusion cut through Eris's despair. "What do you mean, feds?" "I don't know. It's just a feeling. Something isn't right. Be careful, Eris." Before Eris could process the strange warning, the call ended. She stared at her phone, a seed of mystery planted in the barren ground of her hopelessness. An hour later, as dusk painted the city in shades of orange and purple, there was a knock at her door. It was a sharp, authoritative rap, not the hesitant tap of a neighbor or the thud of a delivery person. Thinking it was a courier with her final paperwork, a final indignity, she opened it without looking through the peephole. Her breath caught in her throat. Standing in her doorway was her John Doe. He wasn't pale or unconscious. He wasn't clad in a flimsy hospital gown. He was standing tall, dressed in a perfectly tailored dark suit, his face etched with a new, sharp intensity. The vulnerability she had seen on the operating table was gone, replaced by a formidable aura of calm, controlled power. He looked healthy, vital, and incredibly dangerous. Flanking him was a stern-faced woman in a similar suit, her eyes scanning the hallway with a professional's vigilance. He offered a small, almost apologetic smile that didn't quite reach his intense eyes. "Dr. Thorne," he said, his voice a smooth baritone, nothing like the pained gasps she'd last heard from him. "I don't believe we were properly introduced. My name is Special Agent Julian Rios, FBI." He gestured to the woman beside him. "This is my superior, Special Agent in Charge Reynolds. We need to talk." Eris could only stare, her mind struggling to reconcile the bleeding man on her table with the federal agent standing on her doorstep. The world didn't just tilt on its axis, it flipped completely upside down. She numbly stepped aside, letting them in. They moved with a quiet purpose that filled her small living room, making it feel even smaller. "Please, sit," Eris managed, gesturing vaguely at her couch. "Thank you, Doctor," Sack Reynolds said, her voice crisp and businesslike. She remained standing. Julian, however, took a seat opposite Eris, his eyes never leaving her face. "I want to start," he said, his voice softer now, more personal, "by saying thank you. You saved my life. There is no ambiguity in that statement. You saved my life." Eris shook her head, trying to clear the fog. I don't understand. The gunshot—" "I was deep undercover, Doctor," Julian explained, leaning forward slightly. "My team and I have been investigating a multi-state criminal enterprise for the better part of a year. A network involved in massive, systemic Medicare fraud and the trafficking of stolen high-value pharmaceuticals." SAC Reynolds picked up the narrative. "The network is facilitated at the local level by trusted professionals. Doctors, administrators, people in positions of power. The entire scheme is overseen by a senior vice president at Omni Health." Eris felt a cold dread creeping up her spine. "One of the central hubs of this operation," Reynolds continued, her gaze sharp as flint, "is City Central Hospital. And its primary facilitator, the man responsible for laundering the money and diverting the pharmaceuticals, is Dr. Marcus Vance." The name landed in the quiet room like a detonation. Eris felt the floor drop out from under her. Marcus? Petty, greedy, morally bankrupt Marcus, yes. But a major criminal? "Last Saturday," Julian said, his voice tight with the memory, "my cover was blown. An enforcer for the organization was sent to eliminate me. The gunshot wound wasn't a random mugging. It was a targeted assassination attempt." Everything clicked into place with a sickening lurch. Marcus's insistence on a transfer, his cold fury. It wasn't about money. It wasn't about policy. Julian's eyes locked onto hers, and in them, she saw the horrifying truth. "He wasn't trying to transfer me to save the hospital money, Dr. Thorne. He was trying to transfer me to a facility where his people could finish the job. When you refused, when you took me into that operating room and buried yourself in there for hours, you didn't just save my life. You saved our entire federal case." The irony was so immense, so staggering, it was almost comical. The single act of compassion that had cost her everything, her job, her reputation, her future, was the one thing that had inadvertently blown open a massive criminal conspiracy. Her personal low point was the FBI's biggest break. Sack Reynolds stepped forward. "Dr. Vance fired you because you became a loose end, a compassionate, unpredictable variable in his carefully managed equation. He thinks he's silenced you. He thinks you're broken and discredited, but we think you might be our most valuable asset." She looked at Eris, not with pity, but with a profound, steely respect. "Dr. Thorne, we need your help. We need you to help us burn his entire world to the ground." The next day, Eris found herself in a place that felt a million miles from the familiar, visceral reality of the ER. It was a temporary FBI command post, set up in a sterile, anonymous office building downtown. The air buzzed with the low hum of electronics and the murmur of hushed, serious conversations. They led her into the war room, and she stopped dead in the doorway. One entire wall was a massive whiteboard, a chaotic spiderweb of photographs, names, bank records, and shipping manifests, all connected by lines of red and black marker. It was a constellation of crime, and at its very center, like a dark sun, was a smiling, professional photograph of Dr. Marcus Vance. Next to him was a picture of a silver-haired, patrician-looking man she recognized from Omni Health promotional materials. Julian stood beside her. "Welcome to the nightmare," he said quietly. He and Sack Reynolds walked her through the board, detailing their investigation. They had offshore accounts, shell corporations disguised as medical suppliers, and encrypted communications. It was a mountain of circumstantial evidence, but Marcus was insulated, protected by layers of corporate bureaucracy and plausible deniability. He's smart, Reynolds admitted, her frustration evident. He never handles the product himself. He never makes a direct transfer of funds. We can prove the hospital is a hub of criminal activity, but we can't place the smoking gun directly in Marcus Vance's hand. We need someone who knows the system from the inside. Someone who knows his routines, the hospital's vulnerabilities, the things an outsider would never see. Eris stared at the board, her medical mind, trained to find patterns and diagnose complex systems, kicking into a new gear. Her eyes scanned the data, not as a collection of crimes, but as a patient's chart. She was looking for the anomaly, the subtle symptom that revealed the underlying disease. She pointed to a name on the board. Med Logistics Solutions, she read aloud. I've seen their invoices. Marcus fast-tracked their contract himself 6 months ago. Their delivery times are always after 11 p.m. No legitimate medical supplier makes routine deliveries in the middle of the night. It's when the administrative wing is empty. She moved to another section, a printout of billing codes. And this, she said, her finger tracing a line of code. This is the billing code for Zaltrap, a high-value colorectal cancer drug. Why is the orthopedic surgery wing, Marcus's old department, ordering it in bulk? It makes no sense clinically. Jules and Reynolds exchanged a look of dawning realization. Eris was seeing things they couldn't, connecting dots they didn't even know were dots. She wasn't just a witness anymore. She was a forensic expert. Work with us, Sack Reynolds said, her voice firm. Officially, as a special consultant to this investigation, we will provide full protection, and when this is over, we will ensure your professional reputation is not just restored, but celebrated. A fire she thought had been extinguished began to burn in Eris's chest. This was no longer just about her. It was about every patient Marcus had endangered, every colleague he had intimidated, and the sanctity of the oath he had so casually betrayed. Yes, she said, her voice clear and strong. I'll do it. Their first move was to test the defenses. Marcus, paranoid and cornered, had preemptively moved to discredit her. He had filed an official complaint with the local police department, painting Eris as an unstable, rogue doctor with a personal vendetta, a narrative the police were all too willing to accept. Eris and SAC Reynolds found themselves in a drab interrogation room at the local precinct, sitting across from a Detective Harding, a grizzled, cynical cop whose posture radiated disdain for federal involvement in his city. So let me get this straight, Harding said, leaning back in his chair with a squeak of worn leather. He looked at Eris as if she were a bug under a microscope. You're telling me that Dr. Marcus Vance, one of this city's most respected hospital administrators, a man who sits on 3 charity boards, is a secret drug kingpin? And you, his eyes narrowed, a doctor he fired for cause, who also happens to be his ex-wife, are the FBI's star witness? Forgive me if this sounds less like a federal case and more like a disgruntled ex-wife's revenge fantasy. The dismissal was so blatant, so steeped in misogynistic cliché, that Eris felt a flash of pure rage. She saw instantly how Marcus had played it, weaponizing their past to make her look hysterical and unreliable. Reynolds fixed Harding with a gaze as cold as a morgue slab. Detective, this is now a federal investigation. Dr. Thorne is a material witness under our protection. I suggest you update your perspective. Harding just grunted, making it clear he was no ally. The system, from the bottom up, was on Marcus's side. The next front was the corporation itself. As a strategic move, the FBI's legal team arranged for Eris to formally appeal her termination to a special review board at the main Omni Health Tower. It was a sterile, high-altitude boardroom with a panoramic view of the city, designed to feel like the top of the world. The board consisted of 3 stone-faced executives, allies of the silver-haired VP on the FBI's whiteboard. Marcus was there, sitting with them, looking serene and untouchable. He was among his own kind. Eris, coached by the FBI lawyer beside her, presented her case calmly, focusing on patient ethics and the Hippocratic Oath. They let her speak, their faces impassive masks of corporate indifference. When she was done, the lead executive, a man named Sterling, steepled his fingers. Dr. Thorne, while your passion is noted, Omni Health has a fiduciary duty to its shareholders. A hospital is a business, a very expensive business. It seems your personal priorities are fundamentally incompatible with the realities of a modern healthcare framework. It was the most infuriating, soulless piece of corporate doublespeak Eris had ever heard. They were confirming, to her face, that profits mattered more than people. My personal priorities saved a man's life, Eris said, her voice tight. Sterling gave a thin, dismissive smile. A man who represented a significant, unrecoverable financial loss. Your termination is upheld. Furthermore, he added, his voice hardening, should you choose to speak publicly about this matter in a way that disparages this company or its employees, I assure you our legal response will be swift, comprehensive, and ruinous for you. It was a threat, plain and simple. They were a monolith, and they were trying to crush her into silence. Eris walked out of that boardroom, not with her head bowed, but with her spine straighter than ever. The rage was no longer just a feeling. It was fuel. That night, she met Maya in a secluded corner of a city park, under the dim glow of a street lamp. Her friend was visibly terrified, pulling the collar of her jacket up as if to hide. "Eris, this is crazy," Maya whispered, her eyes darting around. "They're watching everyone. It has been monitoring emails. Marcus walks the floors like a prison warden. People are scared." Eris felt a pang of guilt for putting her friend in this position, but she knew she had no choice. "Maya, he's not just firing people. He's trafficking drugs that are supposed to go to sick patients. People are probably dying because of what he's doing. This is bigger than me. It's bigger than both of us." Maya's face paled as she processed the full gravity of the accusation. She thought for a long moment, her fear wrestling with her conscience. Eris could see the exact moment the conscience won. Maya's expression hardened with a familiar, righteous anger Eris knew so well. "Last month," Maya said, her voice trembling but firm, "a patient on the oncology ward died. His chemo was suddenly ineffective. The doctors couldn't understand it. They said it was like he was getting saline drips." Eris and Maya locked eyes, the horrifying implication hanging between them. "Okay," Maya said, a new resolve in her voice. "I'm in. What do you need me to do?" The air in the FBI command post crackled with a new energy. With Maya as their inside source, the circumstantial case began to solidify into a prosecutable one. She confirmed their suspicions. Marcus personally, and bizarrely, oversaw the late-night disposal of expired or damaged pharmaceuticals in the hospital's old basement incinerator. It was the perfect cover. In the war room, Eris stood before the whiteboard, staring at Marcus's picture. "He's arrogant," she said to Jules and Reynolds. "His fatal flaw has always been his ego. He truly believes he's the smartest person in any room. He thinks he's outsmarted me, the hospital, and now the FBI. We don't need to trap him. We just need to let him boast into a microphone." And so, the plan was born. Maya would wear a wire. She would approach Marcus during one of his late-night disposal runs, playing the part of a newly converted disciple. She would flatter him, express admiration for his business acumen, and bemoan the sentimentalist ways of his ex-wife. She would bait his ego, and he would swallow it whole. The night of the sting was cold and clear. Eris sat in the back of a dark surveillance van parked across from the hospital's deserted loading docks. The van was cramped, filled with the ghostly green glow of monitors and audio equipment. The faint crackle of static was the only sound. Beside her, Jules was a statue of coiled tension, his eyes fixed on the entrance, his hand never far from the butt of his holstered pistol. "You okay?" he asked quietly, noticing the way she was rubbing her clammy palms on her jeans. "I'm fine," she lied. "Just worried about Maya." "She's a brave woman," Jules said, like her friend. On the audio feed, they heard Maya's footsteps echoing in the hallway, then her voice, artificially bright. "Dr. Vance? I was just finishing up. I saw the light on." Marcus's voice, smooth and self-satisfied, came through the speaker. "Burning the midnight oil, nurse. The price of excellence." "It's just impressive," Maya said, her performance so convincing it made Eris's heart ache. "How you keep everything running so smoothly. How you keep OmniHealth happy. After Dr. Thorne? Well, I see now she was holding this place back." The bait was taken. The hook was set. "Eris was a sentimentalist living in a world that no longer exists," Marcus said with a dismissive chuckle. "Medicine is a business, Maya. You have to be smart. Come on, let me show you how we trim the fat from the budget." Aris's breath hitched as she watched on a hidden camera feed. Marcus was leading Maya away from the main floors, toward the service elevator that led to the basement. He's taking her to the incinerator room, Eris whispered into her headset, which was connected to Sack Reynolds and the tactical team stationed nearby. Just like we planned. The basement was a creepy, cavernous space of exposed pipes and damp concrete lit by bare, caged bulbs. In the center stood the hulking, ancient incinerator. Stacked nearby were dozens of cardboard boxes, all marked with biohazard symbols. Marcus picked one up and sliced it open with a box cutter. Inside, nestled in foam, were vials and boxes of high-value drug soapiates, cancer therapies, immunosuppressants. "Look at this," Marcus said, his voice swelling with pride as he lectured his audience of one. "Thousands of dollars of expired product. To the government, it's a write-off. To our books, it's destroyed. But to our partners in South America, it's a gold mine. A perfect, closed-loop system. No waste, all profit." He was confessing. He was laying out the entire conspiracy with the glee of a magician revealing his trick. In the van, Eris felt a surge of cold triumph. "But what about Dr. Thorne?" Maya asked, her voice a perfect imitation of naive curiosity. "Weren't you worried she would find out? She was always so thorough." Marcus let out a short, cruel laugh that echoed in the damp basement and crackled through Eris's earpiece. "Eris?" he scoffed. "She only ever saw the patient. She never once looked at the balance sheet. Honestly, that's why I married her in the first place. She was so blinded by her halo she couldn't see the business right in front of her. It's the same reason I divorced her. She never understood what it takes to be truly successful in this world." He leaned in, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. "Getting rid of her wasn't just necessary for the business. It was the most satisfying business decision I've ever made." In the darkness of the van, Eris closed her eyes. It was the smoking gun and a personal dagger to the heart, all in one. A single tear, hot with a mixture of pain and vindication, traced a path down her cheek. Jules saw it. He gave her a firm, reassuring nod, then spoke quietly into his microphone. "All teams, we have it, go." The response was instantaneous. Doors burst open at both ends of the basement corridor. Marcus spun around, his arrogant smirk dissolving into a mask of pure shock, as he found himself facing a swarm of black-clad FBI agents with weapons raised. He sputtered, speechless, as Julian Rios stepped out of the shadows. The man Marcus had left for dead, the John Doe he had tried to dispose of, was now standing before him, the embodiment of his ruin. With a satisfying click, Jules snapped a pair of handcuffs onto Marcus's wrists. "Dr. Marcus Vance," he said, his voice ringing with the authority of the law, "you are under arrest for conspiracy to commit wire fraud, distribution of adulterated medication, and a litany of other charges that will keep you busy for a very, very long time." Then, Julian leaned in close, his voice low but clear enough for the still active wire to capture for posterity. "You should have just let her do her job." The tactical team led a stunned, ashen-faced Marcus up from the basement. His walk of shame took him through the main corridor of the hospital he once ruled. Doors opened. Nurses, doctors, and janitors people he had bullied and lorded over for years submerged and watched in stunned, silent satisfaction as their tormentor was led away in disgrace. At the far end of the hall, standing in the shadows of an alcove, Eris watched him go. Their eyes didn't meet. He never even saw her. And in that moment, she realized it wasn't about him anymore. It had never really been about him. It was about the oath he'd broken and she'd upheld. And she had won. The fallout was a media tidal wave. "The Samaritan Doctor!" the headlines screamed. News channels ran her picture next to Marcus's scowling mugshot. The story was irresistible. The compassionate doctor, fired for saving the life of an undercover FBI agent, becomes the key to bringing down a corrupt, nationwide conspiracy. The OmniHealth VP was arrested in a televised perp walk from his golf club. The entire corporation was in freefall. Eris became an unwilling national hero, a symbol of integrity in a broken system. She gave one press conference on the courthouse steps, her voice steady and clear. She deflected the praise, dedicating her actions to all the healthcare workers who show up every day and put their patients first, no matter the cost. A few weeks later, she received an invitation. City Central Hospital, now under new federal oversight, wanted to meet. She walked into the same top-floor boardroom where she had been threatened and dismissed. The cold, sterile furniture was the same, but the faces were different. A new oversight committee, led by a woman with kind, intelligent eyes, sat at the table. Dr. Thorne, the woman began, her voice resonating with sincerity. On behalf of this hospital and its entire new leadership, I want to offer you our deepest, most profound apology. You were wronged. You represent the very best of what medicine should be, and we were blind to it. She slid a folder across the table. We would be honored if you would accept our offer to return to City Central, not just as an ER physician, but as the new chief of emergency medicine, with a permanent seat on the hospital's new ethics board. Please, help us fix what's broken. It was total victory, complete vindication, everything she could have possibly wanted. A month later, Eris was sitting in a sunny coffee shop across from Julian Rios. The intensity between them had softened into an easy, comfortable friendship. So, Chief Thorne, he said with a smile over his cup, how does it feel to be back on top? Eris took a sip of her latte and smiled back, a genuine, peaceful smile he had never seen on her before. Actually, I turned them down. Julian's eyebrows shot up in surprise. You what? Why? That was everything you fought for. I thought it was, she said, her gaze distant for a moment. But standing in that boardroom, I realized something. They wanted me to help them patch up a fundamentally broken system, and the fight should never be about patching things up. It should be about building something better from the ground up. She told him about the settlement from her wrongful termination suite, some so large it had made her dizzy, and the flood of donations that had poured in from strangers inspired by her story. The final scene wasn't in a hospital at all. It was on a dusty lot in a low-income neighborhood, a part of the city the gleaming OmniHealth Tower looked down on but never served. Eris Thorne stood in the afternoon sun, a yellow hard hat on her head and a tool belt slung comfortably around her jeans. She was laughing, talking to a construction foreman, pointing at blueprints laid out on the hood of a dusty pickup truck. Behind them, the frame of a new building was rising, a skeleton of hope. A large, temporary sign was staked into the ground out front, its bold, black letters, a declaration of a new oath. The Benjamin Thorne Community Health Clinic. All welcome, all cared for. She had lost her job, her reputation, and nearly her spirit. But in the ashes of that ruin, she hadn't just reclaimed her life. She had built a legacy, a place founded on the simple, radical, and triumphant principle of pure, uncompromised compassion.